The Defensive Player of the Year should only ever be given to a big man. As crazy a statement as that may sound, in this video I will demonstrate the reasons why I believe this statement is true. Before I explain my reasons, I should qualify the statement by saying that the initial winners of the award, between 1982 and 1988, have good reason to have won it, and that the style of play in the 80s was more conducive to guards and forwards winning the award. In total, 7 non-traditional bigs have won the award, whilst 14 traditional bigs have won it. Dennis Rodman and Draymond Green would be the 2 players who cannot fall clearly into either category, as they are a mix of perimeter and interior defense. Of the first 6 years the award was in existence, 5 of the 6 winners were guards or small forwards. We can see a clear correlation between pace, that is the number of possessions a team has per game, and perimeter Defensive Player of the Year winners. In 1982-83, when Sidney Moncrief won his first Defensive Player of the Year award, the average possessions per game league-wide was at 103.1 per game. By the time Michael Jordan won it in 1987-88, the average pace was 99.6. Apart from the next season where the league average was 1 more possession per game, we see a trend in which average possessions decreased drastically for the next 9 seasons, bottoming out at 88.9 possessions per game in the 1998-99 season. As we can see from the above, the faster pace of play, which resulted in more fast break opportunities, run and gun systems of offense, and overall more athletic styles of defense, resulted in guards and forwards winning and being nominated for the award more than in years onwards. When we also factor in the illegal defensive rules, including the zone defense being outlawed, we understand why smaller players won the award, as man-to-man defense was the only defense played. The impact of a big was limited because of this. Tracking back on defense for centers and power forwards became tiresome, and the lack of shooting resulted in the lane being congested when the game slowed down, resulting in less one-on-one defensive opportunities for the bigs. From 1989 onwards, we can see the majority of winners here on out were interior defenders. Between 1991 and 2014, only 2 players won Defensive Player of the Year without being primary interior defenders, Gary Payton in 1996 and Ron Artest in 2004. And if we narrow it down even further, the only other non-center to win the award in this time span was Kevin Garnett. It is with Gary Payton in which we see the first instance of the definition of the award changing. The Defensive Player of the Year is the equivalent of the most valuable player, only for one side of the ball being considered. It's not given to the best defender adjusted for position, but instead the player who had the greatest defensive impact. It shouldn't be misconstrued that I believe Gary Payton wasn't an incredible defender. I believe he is the greatest defensive guard to ever play. His individual defense was outstanding. He had quick hands, and at 6'4" was bigger than most point guards in the league during his prime. He was tenacious, nearly always opting to play press defense on his man and trusting in his abilities if he ever got beat on the first step. He was intimidating, unanimously considered one of the greatest trash talkers of all time, and savvy enough to know what he could get away with, such as hand-checking, tripping, and reaching in. He, alongside Nate McMillan, formed a backcourt that revolutionized the art of the trap, and in the same year he won the award, went on to probably hold Michael Jordan down as well as anyone could in the NBA Finals. And despite all of this, there were at least 5 centers who had more defensive impact than Payton in 1996. David Robinson, Patrick Ewing, Hakeem Olajuwon, Dikembe Mutombo, and Alonzo Mourning. Statistically, there is no accurate way to present the argument. Defensive stats, both basic and advanced, do little to show the true defensive impact a player had. A steal can be recorded for a player who caught a bad pass from the opposition after being hounded by a lockdown perimeter defender, just as a block can be made from a help defender after the main assignment did everything to make the shot as difficult as possible. In advanced metrics, defensive win shares and defensive box plus minus don't help us any better, as they are simply the accumulation of recorded statistics. They can make an average or even bad defender who played on a good defensive team seem valuable. Such was the case with Josh Smith in 2009 when he finished 3rd overall in DPPM. Or a good to great defender seem valueless on a bad defensive team, such as Klay Thompson, who for example in the 2018-19 season finished 15th on his own team in DPPM. He also finished in defensive win shares behind Stephen Curry, despite Curry being a below average defender and having played 9 less games. There is, however, one very specific metric which I believe shed light on the importance of interior defense, and how it weighs far heavier on the overall defense of a team plays. The metric has only been recorded over the past 7 seasons, but in that time it has reliably shown the difference between an elite wing defender and an elite paint presence. This measurement tracks opponent shooting, and then assigns the defender closest to the shot as the one guarding the shoot. Included in this data is the field goal percentage opponents had when guarded by a certain player, and the field goal percentage that should be expected based on the shot distance against an average defender. Let us look at the 2015-16 Defensive Player of the Year selection. Out of 130 first place votes, Kawhi Leonard scored 84, Draymond Green scored 44, and Hassan Whiteside had 2 votes. These 3 players represent best the different defensive styles of play, with Leonard guarding mainly between 15 to 22 feet, Whiteside guarding within 10 feet of the basket, and Green mixing between the two. On your screen you will see the number of shots made, the number of shots attempted, the field goal percentage whilst being guarded by this player, and the estimated field goal percentage against an average defender from the same distance. The first thing that stands out is the difference in total shots defended. Draymond leads with 1,331, Whiteside has 1,056, and Leonard has 681. This is a staggering difference in the number of shots Green and Whiteside contested compared to Leonard, and speaks directly to the areas of the court that they are asked to defend. Even with the influence of the three-pointer having gone from making up 22% of team shots in the 08-09 season to making up 38% of team shots in the 18-19 season, we can still see that the primary focus of any offense, Mike D'Antoni's Houston Rockets withstanding, are shots as close to the basket as possible. The amount of shot opportunities bigs and tweeners like Draymond Green and historically Dennis Rodman had to affect have always been far greater than those by guards and forwards. Bigs in essence guard every player on the floor, as they guard the most attacked area of the hardwood, whilst perimeter defenders are oftentimes charged with simply guarding the point of attack and playing help defense. Moving away from Draymond, who during the mid-2010 small ball revolution was able to guard 1 through 5 consistently, we can look at the 18-19 season. Of the players who guarded the most shots, the top 13 players are all interior defenders. Rudy Gobert won the award for the second time with 65 first place votes, with Giannis Antetokounmpo and Paul George finished in second and third. Paul George is the clear weak link here, as although he did have a monster season with the Thunder, his defensive impact is not comparable to Gobert or Giannis. Neither does it truly stack up with other defenders from that season such as Joel Embiid, Anthony Davis, or Brook Lopez. There are obvious flaws to the stat, as oftentimes defenders who may have made a last-gasp attempt to throw off an opponent's shot may be credited as the defender on a made basket, and thus the one guarding the player who scored, when in reality they could have been covering up someone else's mistake. And the differential in field goal percentage between what a player held his opponent to and what an average player would is skewed towards the perimeter, as the shots are more difficult to make in the first place. But I believe it does effectively show the amount of shots affected by a big far outweigh those by a guard or a forward. Numbers aren't the only way to look at this. We can also take strategy. In the game of basketball, there are quite simply too many ways to neutralize a wing defender's impact. The pick and roll has dominated the game as of late, and it has made it easier to simply force a switch to get a weaker defender to guard the ball handler on the outside. Teams can also, and routinely do, place the assignment of the best perimeter defender to one of the corners to limit the playing area the defender can help out with. If the same is done with a big man, for example at the top of the arc, then the entire game opens up and allows easier baskets at the rim. On top of this, the difference between the most elite outside defenders such as Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Patrick Beverley, Drew Holiday and Marcus Smart, and above to good outside defenders such as Trevor Ariza, Jaylen Brown and Gary Harris isn't as big as people make out, and especially come playoff time. The same, however, is not said in reverse, where the difference between an elite outside offensive threat such as Kevin Durant, James Harden, Steph Curry and Kawhi Leonard, and an average one such as Dennis Schroeder, Tobias Harris and Lou Williams is massive. We've seen matchups in which elite defensive players are worked out of the gym. Recent examples include Kevin Durant scoring 50 points against the Clippers, including 21 with Patrick Beverley as the primary defender, or Kobe scoring 40 on the Jazz, and 19 with Raja Bell as the primary defender. To take this outside of the basketball court, we can look at the football field. The MVP almost always is given to a quarterback or running back, based on the offensive scheme and by virtue of the importance of the position. A wide receiver will never win the award, as their impact is invariably linked to the man throwing the ball. The same should go in the NBA. We can appreciate players who dominate from 15 feet out and marvel at their incredible individual defense. However, it should be limited to that. To leap to the conclusion that they could ever have the most defensive impact in the league is nonsensical, and whilst a Randy Moss or Terrell Owens can definitely help a team win, they can never be the reason they do. Just as a Kawhi Leonard or Klay Thompson can help slow an opponent's scoring down, they will never be the party mainly responsible for it.